This episode is about Newton Research AI. Will it scale or fail? I don't know how much research you've done about this company, but I was impressed with what I found. And I think that the company is something that is giving a new angle into what the AI can do and finding insights and analytics.
This was my recommendation. It's a bit of a cheat because I'm interested in using them for a use case of mine currently. So I've had a chance to chat with the founders. I think it's really interesting. I think it will hopefully be a trend of what AI companies become because they are basically taking a deep, experience, industry knowledge of marketing analytics that they already have as founders and applying AI on top of it. And I think that's where the real magic is. So, you could do this in the automotive industry, in the construction industry, in the healthcare industry, wherever someone has expertise from being in the industry, and then taking that and building agents that are custom or customized to that to solve that problem. So, I think it's interesting. I think I'm excited to talk about the investment into it too, because it was a pretty healthy round of investors.
Tell me about the investors then. What
So
was the what was the investment?
so it was $9 million Series A. It was oversubscribed. It's Graycroft. So Graycroft is they've invested in Venmo, Bumble, Buddy Media, social media agency acquired by Salesforce, Maker Studio, digital content network acquired by Disney. Then Bessemer Ventures was the other co-lead. They're LinkedIn, Shopify, Twilio, Pinterest, DocuSign, Yelp, Twitch, SendGrid, Square. So some big names in the MarTech space. S4S Capital. Do you know who Martin Sorrell is?
Yeah, yeah, I know them.
So yeah, he was WPP for a long time. Left, created um, S4 Capital. They have an agency, Monks, which is leading in creative AI agents right now and doing a really good job. They've invested in TV Scientific, which is a CTV ad platform. ID5, which is a alternative identifier to continue to target people where cookies don't exist anymore. We're getting deep ad tech today. Four screen digital automotive media and in-car advertising technology. The other investors, so LiveRamp Ventures, which is where these co-founders have exited to before, which we can talk about a little bit. And then Amperin Ventures, I think that's how you pronounce it. So that is, Joe Zawalski, who was the CEO of MediaMath, and then Eric Frenchie, who led Undertone and co-hosts Architecture Podcast, another great podcast. So it's a good mix of, like, technology, big technology, and really deep ad tech experience. What else did you find out about the investment?
No, I think you found much better, much more than I did. What I really was surprised, like how many of these good venture capital firms actually splurge the money in this, and arguably in the past that capital was competing other capital was coming from the other VCs that maybe didn't have a so rigid approach to funding startups. But these days, I mean, if you get this from these top brands, I mean, that means something, right? Like that this you're not coming as someone who is a complete novice as a founder with the idea that has no legs,
Yeah,
right? So if we think about a Bessemer Venture, Graycroft, these are not a kind of small players,
they're
right? They've been
huge.
around, right? And especially if you have a long run for 20, 30 years doing that stuff, even longer, in some cases, it's a strong indicator, right? Like you gain trust of some people that are very skeptical about the business or ideas, right? So that what was standing out to me. And that's why I started to dig even more, right? So I started to think about like the founder.
Yeah, what'd you find out
Uh,
about the founders?
I think John Hector, right? So he is an interesting character. It's not his first rodeo, which I think had a say in the kind of this whole assessment of the company, you know? And, like a Series A arguably is not a moment when they invest only into founders. They investing in a product and kind of already something that
Established.
has some traction. But I think it's when it's coming from someone who has this history of, building companies and selling, um, I think that signal is much stronger. I think these individuals are um, getting into this the proper conversations much faster.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Right.
because he had an exit, so Navic Networks, which was set box top data, programmatic TV buying in 2001 to 2008, so we're going back for when that was happening. Microsoft exit there. Integral Reach exited to Rovi, which is now TiVo, and then Data Plus Math, TV attribution platform that sat on top of LiveRamp's, household identity graph, exited to LiveRamp for 150 million. So he has a good track record.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's all about IPO because you don't see in that description IPO, right? So people get into these fallacies like, oh, you got to be like, Mark Zuckerberg or someone who is just having a big splash. Oh, Figma, co-founder, right? Or yeah, I mean, yes, that's definitely so huge accomplishment for anyone to be in their shoes. I think it's a it's something that everybody in the Silicon Valley or building a startup really thinks about. But there are multiple other ways to succeed in this space. And I think if you build a company, it gets to the stage and is getting acquired and is continuing living under other brand, delivering what it's supposed to. I think that's a great success. I mean, let's be honest, right? Success has a multiple dimensions and the forms.
Oh,
So this is
yeah.
one of them, and I think he's pretty successful. So the list of accomplishments that you read, it's actually something that, in my opinion, is enough for these VCs to, splurge money on and trust him.
Well, I think it's 2 different types of, like, leaders, right? So, John and then Matthew, who was involved in all of those, Matthew Emmons, Stephen Bennett was involved, I think, in the last one. You need people like this. Like, that's to take a company from 0 to 1 to 5 or whatever the number is to get acquired for millions of dollars is a much different skill set than running a $1 billion company or even $1 million company. Um,
Yep.
and if you have the mindset, I want to say all 3 founders are, well, one's McGill, 2 are MIT. They're like deep mathematics engineer minds, and they can think of new ideas and keep spinning them up, and they know how to grow that company from the early days to a established company. I think I relate to them because I get when something's, like, humming, I don't wanna deal with it anymore, I wanna go do something new, and that's, like, the mindset of these guys, so, yeah, I'm guessing they're doing just fine financially, and they wanna go and build new stuff like they're doing right now.
Yeah, I think so. I also want to point that they have a deep experience in the marketing analytics domain. So let's not debase that element of important assessment criteria, right, for the investors. I think you know, being in that space, coming from that space, having a track of record of companies that you built and you sold and were acquired, I think that is an extra validation, for the someone who is leading that team, and also, like you said, right, there's a lot of complementary skill set that go along giving them the ability to to go deeper. And I also adopted a new situation, so that's kind of where what I want to ask you about the market fit. Do you see that this technology, what they building, it really has a fit on the market with the existing landscape of players?
Yeah, I recently saw this thing that Luma put out. Luma's a investor in the ad tech world, that showed, like, I wish I could remember what it was. It was like AI fakers, AI adopters, and people who truly are AI companies. And I would say most of ad tech right now is in the AI fakers to AI adopters. They're not true AI companies. They're building an ad tech platform. Like that is what they're good at. They're really good at machine learning, but that is not LLMs and generative AI. And they still have to maintain that platform. And so then they're getting asked to build LLMs or adopt LLMs to build on top of their platform to help companies and integrate that into their analytics, into other actions that their customers may take on their platform. I think it's hard. And so when you have a company like Newton or other AI platforms coming up that are like, we can supplement and help you do this, I think there is a lot of opportunity. It's really expensive to go and develop all of this. um, and right now, analytics is really manual to do for a lot of companies and a lot of customers, and then data lives everywhere. So I think, whether Newton's selling to the end advertiser agency or the ad platform themselves, they have a big area or TAM that they can go and sell to. Agencies and brands are upset because it's really hard to understand, how is my marketing doing? Where is it performing well? Where is it not? And the platforms are having a hard time figuring out, how do we deliver this information, whether it's like planning and forecasting, attribution analytics, and they're getting pushed by the brand. So there's a big problem to solve here right now. I think it'll be interesting to see now with this round, how do they go about telling that story? And, like, do they need a couple of big wins before everyone starts jumping on? And what that looks like. What are your thoughts in terms of their opportunity, and where do you see the biggest market fit?
No, I think you described this pretty well on the agency side and how many of these marketers really feel. I think historically, from my experience, and I might be isolated example or examples, marketing tends to live their own life within the company, and arguably, maybe every function has to some extent the same problem. But I think, there's probably with the marketing, there's a specific, larger gap between the marketers or CMO and the CFO. And I think the analytics is usually very selective, and it's run based on these typical tactical, metrics, like open rate, and, that doesn't mean anything, right? Like, or MQL, like, it doesn't mean anything to the CFO,
Yep.
like, literally nothing except that, "Okay, I'm spending money on this." So I'm really curious how this tool will help to bridge that, because they advertising this as, "Okay, we're not trying to use the LLM in this typical way," right? And, I tested myself multiple times using, Google Gemini or using GPT and Claude. Okay, you take some data and you curate it this little bit and you just upload the Excel spreadsheet, whatever, and then it spits out something, but it's just very
Surface.
it exactly, it has some depth, but I don't think is really going deep into contextualizing this in the larger spectrum of things that the company operates, right? Which is important because you have to put it in through the lens of industry, the function, and also the stage of the company. So that's not easy. So I'm looking forward to how they're gonna solve it. That's number one. Number two is, I think the critical part of the business will be around the security model that runs within the client's own environment,
Yep.
and it's preventing the data movement between the systems. I think there's a lot of people, a lot of industries that are sensitive to that, and rightfully so. So I'm looking forward how they're gonna solve this because that could be a very important selling point for them.
Yeah. They're gonna have to have, like, a siloed instance for every customer they have, and then if you're talking about a platform who has hundreds or thousands of customers, will those each be siloed instances? I think it will depend. Have we even said what they do yet? So, they basically have built intelligent AI agents that automate marketing analytics workflows, making complex analytics accessible and affordable. They're focused on brands, agencies, publishers, and tech companies. I think the thing that's unique, as I mentioned before, is they have very customizable agents. So they call them blueprints, and it's trained on real marketing use cases. So that's kind of how they've changed what they've done here. And so they can do things like, a blue one of their AI agents or their blueprints can build your AM team a QBR. It can help you come up with a marketing plan based on previous performance and what's available in the market today. It can create a mixed marketing model for you to evaluate all of your spend and the performance you've seen. So basically, any marketing analytics use case their agents should be able to solve. It sounds great. Like, that is that is, like, what you want to have an AI agent do for you. How hard is it to actually implement? I think that's kinda where you're getting to as well. Is it is the data secure, and is it privacy, compliant? But also, like, how hard is it to get one of these agents to work on your own data? How much, like, upfront work do you have to do to get it there? And I think hopefully we'll see some of those success stories coming out, but companies have to be open to, "Okay, we're okay with building these AI agents upfront to save us time in the long run."
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you're bringing up. What is required to bring to the table if you want to make this tool use a use case to fit your business. A lot of AI users, they assume there's some magic here. There's definitely some that we were not accustomed to have before, but I think you just putting too much hope on what you buying, with these tools. So you can't forget about building your fundamentals in order to get a bit higher ROI, and I think that's going to be a hard sale for them too. And I don't want to sound negative. I think they entering the really large non-discretionary marketing analytics market, right? So that is having a double digit growth, and it's also perfectly timed, right? So if you think about that, a lot of companies trying to prove the ROI. So if they can really get this done in marketing, I think they will be a very powerful tool in those conversations internally for the CMOs and the marketers. Not only that they spending effectively the money, but also that they adopting AI. They have
Yes.
actually figured out how to do this, right? So there's a playbook for each of these use cases. By the way, when somebody says blueprint, I just imagine these people from Deloitte coming to my company and giving me blueprints, and so it's a great slice, but I don't know if this is gonna work. But going to my point, yes, if they can shine and say, "Yeah, you know what? Actually, we actually figured out how the AI will play out in marketing," and it's like that's gold.
Yeah.
That's gold.
I wonder if this is kind of the next evolution of services. Like, these companies come in that historically did your marketing, and I think we're seeing it a little bit, historically helped you plan, strategize, and execute your marketing and gave insights about it. If their next generation is actually helping you build AI agents that will do this for you. And you're seeing some agencies, I think Monks in particular is very focused on helping brands transform to be AI forward. I was just at Inbound. I Some of the leading HubSpot agencies are building their own AI agents off of HubSpot's agentic workflows. I think this is where you're going to see a lot of services that come in and fill that gap for brands that maybe can't do it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right about this. I think that the biggest winners in this marketing race to AI adoption will be agencies, and there's a simple reason that is fundamentally changing the market in general, which is it runs so fast, it's changing so fast that we have no resources within the company to keep up with this. So you technically need to outsource this to someone else that is a domain expert and is investing all the time as a core business to be on top of everything.
Yep. And I've seen it and done it at multiple companies. I think the hard part
Yes,
is when you're at one
yes.
company, it's like, "I haven't done this before," you know?
Exactly. So that
So
goes back to our earlier point about building your foundations and understanding how the things should be done. Because if you don't, and your company is like Series A or, even Series B or C, often companies just haven't figured out this shit. You will be even under bigger pressure right now to leverage some external resources to come in, build the foundation, and layer different technologies that are on top of the accelerated market. I almost see this as a kind of race where people will stop paying attention what tool they're using. I don't think they're gonna recognize the brands anymore
interesting.
because because it might be so fast. So I think what we discussing here is a TAM. Um, you know, market is probably around. Look at my notes here. Um, 5.3 billion to 7 billion in 24-25, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about right now. So I think with the CAGR between the 13 to 17%, that can give you the 12 billion by 2030, right? And by 2032, you're going to be around 20 billion. So that's pretty impressive growth, right?
And that's just marketing attribution. That's not even
Exactly.
going into AI. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're gonna carve out that money out of the existing market, and then I think it's gonna accelerate. But let's be honest, I think it will just cannibalize a lot of these resources that are today in the form of headcounts, right? Doing some manual work, some agency work as well, right? Agencies will change their operating model as well. So yeah, this is my take. This is really my take about um how these agents, will start changing the functionality of the every single marketing team.
Totally agree. What do you think in terms of their competition? I kinda look at it as, like, there are a lot of pre-existing marketing attribution tools which make up that $5 billion market.
Mhm.
Do you think they're evolving? Do you think these new companies will come and wipe them out? What are your thoughts there?
That's a very good question because technically they don't have direct competitors,
Not really.
right? So if you
Not
there's
yet.
nothing yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's the problem with a lot of these new emerging companies, and I don't know how the VC is actually solving for that, but that's something we probably need to figure out as well. You should probably invite someone that can help us to answer that question. However, going back to your question, I think there are a couple of categories of competitors that I imagine for this company. So, the number one is the incumbent platforms, right? So, Adobe's, the HubSpots, and the Salesforce. I think these are kind of the natural suspects, right? So, anything that is probably in the CRM
yep.
will be a natural competitor in that space. Then you have a services firms. So we talked about this. There's a lot of agencies, but there are some also specialized services houses, like service houses that are doing only analytics. So they will be on the forefront of the same category. They will have the same opportunity to take this service and put the product layer on it and then compete.
Yep.
I don't know how far they are, how many of them they are there, but I can imagine that. And I think the third one is just anything that is a AI native in their space, right? So these companies could come from ground up like they do, but it could be also something, you know, like Sprout Social, right? It's a SaaS company, but definitely has a enough playbooks built already in the platform that if this is powered by the data and LLM is behind helping to find these insights and to go really deep and that model is built very well, yeah, that could be a competitor as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only
Has
thing
customers too.
yeah, they do. I think the only thing that's potentially missing there is, like, Tableau or some of those, like, legacy traditional analytics, providers. They could go honestly, they could partner with a new one. Like, that is also a possibility of, like, they wanna figure out how to further this. The nice thing that I think for Newton is, like, the world's kind of their oyster on who they wanna sell to. Like, they don't have a platform themselves that fits a specific use case, and they have to edit it and transform it and build it to fit a brand's use case versus a platform's use case. They can just plug those AI agents into any workflow. And so I think time will tell, like, who is going to adopt this. And if it's cost effective enough, you might see a lot of companies adopting it and growing and potentially acquiring, depending on the size, Newton down the road. So it's just theirs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree with you that for them, IPO is unlikely
Oh, yeah.
to happen.
I would, don't
So,
you kind of think that with most AI companies? Like, not like the Claudes and Geminis of the world,
yes.
but they're just going to get acquired.
Yeah, yes, I agree. There are 2 reasons why I think that's the case. The number 1 is that a lot of these incumbents, they are further along in bed with a lot of the customers. So, that's one. And then if you think about the AI native, companies, with a few exceptions, of course, like, fundamental, structurally important, like, Claude and this, Anthropics and all of these others. The world is changing so fast, that landscape is changing so fast, that I don't think they're gonna have enough time to migrate all these customers that are today tight with these incumbents. Yeah, somebody can argue, "Yeah, we can do this migration fast." No, I don't think so. Like, I don't think so. I don't think it's only about technology change. It's really about changing the mindset of these users that eventually will need to adopt, but I don't think they're gonna adopt that fast. So you're somewhere in between, these entities that can buy from you and they have a propensity to just quickly test and verify whether this works. Entities that are under pressure as well because they need to make some drastic changes. But there's still like a big chunk of the market that might just be slower and have a different pace, and that'll be a mainstream. But let me ask you this, because you mentioned this, like, about the CRMs and incumbents, and you mentioned the Power BI and Tableaus. I I'm not sure if they actually can beat Microsoft Dynamics. Uh, that's a very interesting category of the CRM, and
Yeah.
because they are in the CRM space, but they're kind of not, you know what I mean? And they also focusing so much on the larger companies, on the large, enterprise business that is tied with the multi-thread type of sale,
Yeah,
right?
they're not owned by anyone, right?
Power BI is owned by Microsoft, Tableau is owned by Salesforce.
Oh, they are. But I don't think of them as, like, embedded in Salesforce, you know? Like, my company uses Tableau and Salesforce. I don't think of those as, like, that's a benefit that they're owned by the same company like a Microsoft Dynamics,
I think there's something about integration
I
and,
guess.
stuff that is working on the
It
back
doesn't
end.
work well.
Yeah, I think you can definitely benefit from that, but the Power BI is very much ingrained into what the Microsoft Dynamic,
That makes sense. I haven't used Power BI before.
yeah, it's like, I mean, the entire offering is very different to what the other CRMs are offering. It's almost like getting in a platform where you have a big blocks and you can just build your own stuff. Probably adding that layer where you can use the Copilot, or Copilot is somewhere embedded in between these tools, and it's powering the Power BI output. I think it's a pretty good setup, for these customers, right? Why would we just migrate to Newton Research, right? It would need to be superior to this, and I'm not sure if that's also their goal.
Well,
Um,
I think you have to think about, so you've dealt with integrating into these tools a lot more than me. I am a user of these tools quite a bit. Um, Never have I ever logged into Tableau and thought, "Oh, it's so easy to get all the data I needed." Like, it is not a user-friendly tool. I think you're gonna see some of the more, like, data cloud platforms, whether it's Google BigQuery or AWS or others, try to make this data a little more easily accessible and LLM friendly. Google's just come out with a product that you can do it in Google Sheets. It's a little clunky, but I also just don't think they potentially have all the context as they should. Like, you need to pull in all your platform spend data, as well, which if you're using 6 or 7 platforms across social and programmatic to buy, and then you're also doing linear TV ads if you're an enterprise brand, I think it's actually kinda hard to pull that all into Power BI or Tableau and tie everything back. So, I don't see companies that are using Microsoft Dynamics saying, like, "We'll just use Newton Research," but I could see them figuring out how to use a tool that is powered by a Newton Research. It's a good question, like, how many end brands will actually pick this up? Agencies might, but will end brands? Sophisticated ones?
There's always a group of risk takers, right? And they usually break the news when they succeed. Right? It's almost like in sports. There's a lot of people playing basketball, but only few will get to the NBA. That's a really, really small group of people.
Mhm.
That might be a phase where they actually just getting some traction. But I feel like the biggest the biggest conversion they're gonna get when they start proving that the model really works. So when I think about the product, right? So the entire architecture of this intelligence tool, right? So it's a multi-agent system where it's not like most people think today, okay, there's a one thing that I see on my page and this thing is doing the work. No. I don't think they think that way. I think they trying to split this semantic based query, right? Let's say analyze the incremental lift of my latest campaign, right? So whatever give me the insight of what it is. So what the system will do on their end is really decompose the complex task into smaller, manageable subtasks and delegates these subtasks to specialized worker agents that can execute them in parallel, right? So it's not like linear approach; it's a parallel approach,
Yep.
which is what you know all the companies want to do, right?
Yeah, go grab
And
this from my ad tech platforms, go grab this from my CRM, go look at this data over here, put it all together and tell me what the result was.
pretty much,
Yep.
right? So for example, is one agent might be tasked with the data cleaning, right? Another was a preparation. Another will be with building a control group, right? And third one will be just running the kind of all the final aggregation and right, statistical financial kind of analysis, right? So the architecture allows for a degree of reasoning, planning, and efficient execution of that beyond capabilities of the simple question and answer, because that's how people think today, right? But it's not. It's just this. It's not like a bot only, right? They have this semantic question and then you're getting answer, right? Like that almost like sounds like silly at this point. So the platform offering both, right? You have a pre-built agents with that would come with the preloaded with the marketing science playbooks and the blueprints like you mentioned earlier, and the functionality for the clients to build their own custom agents. You're starting with something that is more standard, but then you have to evolve into something else, and then you have to adopt into these adjustments based on the industry, based on the kind of size and all of the other components that it's just making this company unique. So that's why this decomposing is so important, right? That's what is really making this unique. I think that's where a lot of their success will be dependent on. This can be hard for them to compete with large organizations like Microsoft, right? That's where I see that Microsoft is positioned. Of course, it's a large company, right? So that's probably the biggest disadvantage, but still has a lot of resources they can put into this and just make this work if they want to.
Yep.
But that's a different story, right? So if the Newton research will take this on and they're gonna hit that faster, that's when this Microsoft Dynamics, it might be just in the tough spot.
Yeah, if they nail those, I think that's a great point. If they nail those initial, like, blueprints or playbooks where you get actionable results quickly and then you wanna go and customize, then I think they're in a good spot. Let's talk about some we're getting towards it, so let's talk about some risks. I think this is a complex enterprise sales. that can take a while to get in places. I think they already have some existing customers with the Series A, but I think that's a big one. And how do you scale sales and customer success? You have to hire really well to go and do this or partner really well with service and solution providers. What else do you think are some risks for them?
I think their claim on the page, I noticed that this I think they claim that their agents, are highly specialized and trained in marketing, analytics and all the data workflows, and they say that they're over 300 more accurate, uh,
300%
or
more
on
accurate?
relevant industry. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that's a very bold statement. I understand some of that is, it's just a
Marketing spin.
bullshit thing, people just putting out there. But, that's I take it seriously from the company that is analytics based, right? It's like, yeah, you probably checked this.
Yeah, we should ask them.
So we probably should, right? By the way, I was trying to take a free trial, but they don't offer because I was curious to see whether this really is a case. Nevertheless, if that is not true, that's a risk. Number two, I think number two risk is what I mentioned earlier. It's just the security. And it has to be, that's what they're making as a part of the value proposition. That's what I noticed on the webpage. And the entire security architecture, right? Because if that is somehow breached or is not working, and we know that we have a right and left, we have these news about how somebody hacked, a chat where, or just, was able to see this and that, that's scary, right? So I think that goes against this. I think it goes along with this fear that I'm not willing to try this. I'm gonna let others figure it out until I feel like it's safe. So that's another risk. And I think the third one is the transparency because they say that, it's most of the AI is like a black box. And they say, all right, we're going to bring this transparency to you, and you will have access into the code and the processes that are just behind this, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think makes a lot of sense, but if people can't make anything out of it, and I think the biggest buyers might not be technical people, it almost means nothing. So I would be careful with this. But I appreciate that actually somebody's just embracing the transparency problem, right? So it's like Anthropic versus OpenAI. Anthropic has very different approach to things than the other models, right? So so actually that's another risk where that might not really resonate with the buyer. Um, and then of course the competition. I think the competition is not sleeping. And but that's obviously for everybody. So I don't think
Well,
it's a
yeah.
kind of unique to them.
I think like what we already talked about, the big tech, like if Google wants to go and build this, they have ad platforms. They could build something like this. Now, will the execution be as good? Will it be trusted? Will blah blah blah? Like, I think that's will they focus on it? And then startups, well, this won't be the only company that wants to go and tackle this industry. The one other thing I'll call out more of a market trend is that or risk. The reason why this is such a big market is because it's really fucking hard to measure marketing. And as industry regulations come down, we saw it with GDPR, there's more and more states popping up with additional regulations. If any major things are done that makes measuring marketing almost impossible, then it doesn't really matter anymore. Now, I think as an industry, we just keep overcoming it. We find other ways to do it, and you have to show results in some format. And these founders have proven to be very good at measuring predominantly the TV industry, which is the hardest to measure. Um,
Is
but
it?
oh, it's so hard. The reason it's so hard is like connected TV is easier, but think about it. You have a cable box that doesn't have an IP address, that doesn't have any connection to a household. How do you tie that to a cell phone or a computer or anything else? So like linear TV, that's why there was Nielsen is like the best way. to measure ratings and how your ads performed and how many people have viewed it. You don't even really know how many people have viewed an ad on linear TV. It's like a guesstimate based on ratings. Connected TV has made that easier, but they've gone and solved that for years. They know how to do it. They know how to get through tough analytics challenges. But yeah, it's that's the thing I'm always worried about in my career in general. Is what are the
Mhm.
government regulations that are gonna come down and or a browser's updates like Chrome did over the last few years, or Apple did with iOS 14 that just, like, shut down your ability to target and measure.
I thought that maybe the smart TV is so popular right now,
Makes
that
it
you can
easier.
yeah, exactly. So, like, success of Roku, right, for instance, it's like, Netflix and all these other platforms, of course, they're collecting a lot of data. So I thought, well, we've moved on. I mean, there are people that just don't use,
I don't.
regular cable
Yeah,
anymore. I'm using the YouTube TV.
but
So it's
you're in a very US minded and, that's not the case across
true.
the
That's
world.
absolutely true. Yeah.
And it's easier, although that inventory is not very accessible. Like, you mostly can only buy it directly from Netflix, directly from Hulu, whoever, and it's really expensive. So it's not like it's more similar to linear TV, but there's not like a scatter network, which is when all the locals channels would sell unused ad space, which would be like programmatic in this new world, and it's hard to get ads on a high quality TV, but it's coming. And who knows,
Yeah.
like, connected TV hasn't been an area of government regulation because I feel like government is just 20 years behind the times, like, that will inevitably probably happen.
Well, there definitely is something to say about this in so many other areas, right? Like the government can't control everything and shouldn't. Um, but sure shouldn't. But I think it should also like pay attention to things that are just riskier or riskiest, right?
Yes.
Among all. So if this is not like super risky, why would they, right? I mean, I will leave it up to the business and figure it out. So, what is your take on the path to scale for this company, and what is your take on the path to fail for this company?
Path to scale. I think if they can get a few larger technology platforms to adopt this, they're in a really good spot. That is the best avenue for them. It's probably the longest sales cycle, so they might have to hedge that bet with brands and agencies and publishers in the meantime, but it's gonna be a couple of those large tech platforms. I think LiveRamp is a really good one for them, based on the history there. Finding people that can really sell and tell that story to those tech platforms and act as like a true partner through that process and really help them. And then ecosystem partnerships, so working with where data already lives, Snowflakes, Databricks, these other cloud platforms, um, to help sell as, like, an add-on feature to enable the data. I actually think that's a place data clouds sometimes struggle, and so if they can partner up with those companies and other solutions providers like we talked about. Path to fail. I would say competition. Like, if any of the large platforms we were talking about before, Dynamics, Google, Salesforce, decides to go and do this or buy another startup to go and do this, um, that's a that's a big hindrance. The last one would just be, like, another macroeconomic downturn. If people are not gonna invest in new things, marketing analytics is the last thing to get invested in. People will keep spending brand dollars, although less brand media spend, but they will not say, "Oh, let's spend $1 million on a marketing analytics platform." Figuring out the pricing model will be important for them. Presumably, it's gonna be consumption based, but it's gonna have to back out, right? Like, it's gonna be really hard for a tech platform to to charge for this. It's not an easy pass-through charge. It's kind of like, "Oh, you get this because you're using our platform." So they're gonna have to find the costs and headcount and efficiencies, but helping companies understand that. What are your takes on success and failure?
Before I answer your question,
Yeah,
what's your final position on this? You think they're gonna scale or they're gonna fail?
I think they're gonna scale. I think between the founders, the investors, they have Greycroft and, Bessemer as 2 board members from those companies. Their industry relationships that they've built over the past 25 years, how they're approaching the problem, I think they'll do it faster than any of the large companies, and they'll be successful.
Okay, so I my bulk case is like a path to success is like what you just mentioned, right? The founder investor market fit. I think like you said, there's enough knowledge in this space, there's enough experience to run the company, drive the company, having an exit. I think having a great investors, backing you up and supporting you. I think it's a kind of definitely on the positive side, right? It's this very strong case for scale. The second thing on the positive side in the Bull's case is that I think the multi-agent architecture is a genuine technological innovation. The way they actually put it out there makes a lot of sense, but it's also innovative. It's not as kind of superficial application layer that says, okay, you can have a chat on the right side. Like that's bullshit, right? Like that. Come on, man.
It's the exact opposite of, like, OpenAI. It's you know
Yeah, I mean, I think OpenAI has a different use case, but I think for them is well, we want to leverage this and go really with the breadth of what we do. So that it's purpose built, designed for marketing analytics provides and actually demonstrate a performance advantage. All over all of these things. You know, just really convince me. Another positive thing that I think is helping to scale is that um, the company is positioned to disrupt the high cost and labor intensive analytics, right? Analysts really cost you a lot. And consulting as well,
Yep.
right? So if you can't really figure out with your analyst, the next layer is consulting, and that's the highest tier you're gonna pay for. So I think they have a hefty margin to go after, is my point. So by productizing and automating the complex analytical workflows, they can offer a very scalable and efficient model and that can be supervised by the human, which I think it's a new way of rethinking about this whole thing. They are ROI based and that has legs. Um, the last positive thing I also see here is like an engineering the ecosystem advantage, right? So it's almost like they're almost getting a syndicate of investors that are creating unfair advantage.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned the relationship with LiveRamp and then S4 Capital. So they already have a pre-built ecosystem for product integration, distribution, high level customer introductions. That is gold. That is really gold. And with this fast paced world right now, you have it there, right? Like you don't need to hire a sales rep for at least few years before you start like implementing and doing all this stuff. I'm not saying they won't hire,
Yeah,
but you're gonna get a lot of these leads from these
from the
companies, right?
investors.
Yes. The bear case, on the other hand, is the biggest threat is the AI hype cycle. So I don't think we reached the peak of that. So that
No.
might fizzle out. That might overshadow a lot of these new great ideas because people stop believing, or there will be a major breach and something happens, and then it's like this will just hinder all these changes and the implementations on their end. So I think that will have a profound impact on the enterprise because none of the larger companies wants to be perceived as some amateur on the security side, right? So that's one thing. I think the second one is you mentioned this. and I agree with this. It's just sales complexity, especially in the sales, enterprise sales. That company might be smart enough to really figure out how to do the analytics on the marketing side, but might not be to optimize the sales process to these large enterprise businesses, right? And arguably, the investors might find a way if they want to, but look, they need to thread this carefully, right? Like they won't have the whole day working for them. They have a multiple investments. So so it will be limited number of these. So they need to figure it out by themselves. I mean, the competitive threats, that's obvious, right? So I think Salesforce, rightfully so, recognize that the Tableau environment is a little bit outdated. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It works very well. I think what I'm saying is that it has to be upgraded. It has to elevate. They have to elevate the game. Same with the HubSpot. With HubSpot is slightly different, but it's
Different end
somewhat,
customer. Yeah.
yes. But I think the Adobe might have a big push with the Microsoft. And the reason why I say this is because I think Adobe was doesn't have this kind of typical analytical suite, right? It doesn't have a Tableau or Power BI like Microsoft or Salesforce. They have something in place, but that's not even close to what these two other offers offer. So I think Adobe will spend a lot of time doing this, and especially if you see like they actually pushing almost like a CRM like model
Solution.
right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I think my final position is that they're gonna scale. They're gonna scale to the point where some of the competitors will catch up with them, and that point really depends how many customers they're gonna have. They will need to make a decision whether they can really continue being as innovative as they started with, um, or this is innovative enough to sell this to other player and just cash it, right? So I think it's gonna definitely scale. And if I need to predict who's gonna be the acquirer, I think Snowflake could be. I think Databricks. I don't know. I'm not sure of Databricks, but I think definitely Snowflake could be, and players like that because
They need that
um
solution.
yes, but I think it will really depend how good they are in the marketing domain before they start moving into sales and customer success and others with the similar playbooks. And that might be the selling point when they gonna get into conversation about whether they're gonna sell the company or continue building their own thing beyond that point.
All right, let's play prediction. Last question. How much do you think they exit for?
Really hard to say.
I'm going 275 in 3 to 5 years.
275 what?
Million.
Oh, no. That's gonna go in billions.
You think?
Yes.
All right, so you're saying a billion. How quickly?
If I need to predict this, which I know we're pulling all of that
Just throw it out
out,
there.
out of our ass. I'll say this. I think there's probably a 5 years window by when all these existing SaaS companies will start seeing the benefit of what the LLM can offer in the analytical space. Because, truth being told, this is not easy to solve, as we said here. And then they're going to need to have enough manpower to help them with that. So I think the 5 years feels like right moment. But they might get to their decision making process a little bit earlier, and it's going to be in billions. I don't think these investors will invest in them if that wouldn't be in billions.
All right.
I just don't see this.
So in 5 years, it's either going from 275 million to billions, and we think new in research
Yes.
will scale.
Yes.
Thanks for
All
chatting
right.
about this.
Yeah. Thank you.